And Michael, take it away, go ahead.
Well, first I
Yeah.
want to thank you guys for doing what you do. You do play a major role in the lives of these kids, and you should be commended for that, because it is a great thing you do. Give you a little bit of my story and my history, and then I'll go into the importance of the role that you guys play. I was born in a city, we moved upstate. My mom met a man, and he lived up here, so we moved up here with him. He was very militaristic, very, rule with an iron fist. And I got in trouble one day, and he decided the best way to punish me was to beat me with a harness whip. So the very next day, I wound up having a physical in school just by chance, and they saw everything that happened, right into foster care I went. So, I was somewhat of a problem child. I was diagnosed with ADD. I had a lot of abandonment and rejection issues from my mother and my stepfather, so I don't want to say I was an easy kid to deal with, but I did go in and out of a lot of foster homes. The very first one I was with, I was the second foster child they ever had, and unfortunately, after they said I can't deal with him anymore, I was the last foster child they ever had. And so I bounced around to a couple other ones, and around the age of 15 or 16, my mom and my stepfather had broken up, so I moved back in with her. We still had issues. I was in and out of Family House a couple times. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Family House, but I was in and out of that a couple times. And then finally moved back home, and then, by, I guess, the age of 18, I had moved out on my own. But along those times, even as a young kid with all the issues that I had, you could tell what the purpose of the foster parents were. Some of them you could tell I was just a paycheck. As I was explaining to Rich earlier, I don't know if there's a checklist of basic needs that, as a foster parent you need to provide, but if there was a checklist, I got what that was. I was in a small room, maybe smaller than this, that had 2 bunk beds, and I shared it with 3 other foster kids. And there was just no support there. Her main purpose was to provide me exactly with what I needed and nothing more. So it was difficult for me to work on the issues that I was having because I was so guarded, because clearly there's someone here who doesn't care, and they made it blatantly obvious. The flip side of that, though, is I was fortunate enough to be placed in a couple homes where the people really did care. The one family in particular, they had 1 son of their own, and if you asked them how many kids they had, they always said 2 or 3, however many foster kids they had at the time. And it was during those times that, as a child, I was able to kind of let my guard down a little bit and say, okay, here's someone that does care about me, so maybe I can, not focus on, is this person just gonna leave me like everything else that happened, or is this person gonna actually care about me? So it was definitely beneficial to me in regards that, I felt safe for once. And, even at that young of an age, kids can tell. I don't know all of your experiences and how many foster kids you've had and dealt with, but, regardless of the problems that these kids have going on, we can always tell if you really care or if you don't. And again, I can't stress to be in it for the right reasons. I know you don't make a ton of money being a foster parent, but again, there were homes where you were the paycheck, and I really want to stress the ones that were there for me. There was the one family in particular that I mentioned earlier. He worked at IBM, and again, he treated me as a son, and everything was great. Unfortunately, IBM, this is when they had their first massive layoff, and he just couldn't do it anymore because they couldn't afford to, to have the care that they wanted their children to have. So that's why I had to leave that home, and then I did move around a couple more times, but then I did stumble across another family who were in the same situation. They truly felt I was one of their kids, and they did whatever they could to make me have that safe, that secure home that I had. And it was such an extent that I actually wound up calling the lady a couple times mom. because I had felt that connection that, you know, as a child I so desperately desired. And, you know, I stayed with them until basically I had the chance to move back home. And, you know, she had that lasting impact on me, because here was someone who really did give me that nurturing and that caring that I so, as a child, so desperately needed. And that's one of the points that I just want to get across to you guys is, you know, again, the kids can tell if you're truly there for them and if you have their best interest. And the only way to make an impact on their lives is to give them that avenue of caring and that, you know, listen, I'm here for you, and mean it. And again, I don't know any of you. I'm just going through my own personal experiences with this. So please don't feel like I'm putting anyone down when I say it. But again, they need that security blanket. They, you know, kids are going through turmoil. You know, they've been yanked out of their home for whatever reason. Even if it wasn't the best of situations, it's what was familiar to them. And so now they're being placed in a stranger's home who they don't know. They don't know you from anything. And, you know, we were scared, you know, what's going to happen here. And so by giving these kids that sense of safety, that sense of welcomeness, that sense of, you know, I'm here for you, does more than you can possibly imagine, even from a short-term basis to a long-term basis. You know, I showed Rich something. There's some stats that I have here. You know, every year 20,000 kids will age out of the foster care system. 1 in 5 will be homeless of those children, and 25% of them are going to be incarcerated. So, I mean, the numbers are less than 2% will actually obtain a bachelor's degree. So these kids are, they face an uphill battle, but if they have that safe, secure home life that they can rely on, it gives them the ability to work on these other issues. It gives them the ability to not feel like, well, there's something, like I'm screwed up, there's something wrong with me. And that starts with parents caring about them and giving them that security that they so desperately desire. I don't know.
Okay, I one thing I wanted to ask you as I was introducing you, do you want us to ask questions
Oh,
as you
absolutely.
speak, or
Yeah.
wait to the end or something, or
No, ask questions, because if it's more of a dialogue back and forth,
you prefer that?
Yeah.
And it's okay.
it's a lot easier than
All right.
just
So if we have questions, we'll just
absolutely.
ask you.
And I'm an open book when it comes to it. So if you want to know a little bit more about, you know, my situation, by all means, I'm free to divulge that information.
Okay. Okay.
So
Any questions at this point, anyone? Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I was
No, it's
late,
okay.
but I've got a big family.
Okay.
Dinner time and stuff. No, I just didn't hear how old were you when you came into care? And
when I got placed, I'm actually in the midst of looking up my records, but I
Okay.
believe I was around 9 years old when I got placed. And then I came out around 15 or 16, went back home, but I was in and out of family house a couple times. So until, you know, I turned 18, then I moved out on my own, and that was it. So, but it was in that period of time, again, I'm trying to develop the records, but I can say I was somewhere between 7 and 10 homes. Yeah, you know, as I don't know if you heard the first part, but there was homes where I could tell I was your meal ticket.
Yeah.
And there was other homes where, as I just explained, you know, I was part of the family. You know, there was no question about this isn't my son Bob and this is my foster son Mike. It was, these are my sons Bob and Mike. So.
You touched on it, but is there something more detailed or specific you can say about your own sort of aging out process? You know, and aging out and entering into, you know, a phase of your life, say at age 18, 19, 20, 21. You left foster care at what age, for
I
example?
left foster care, like I said, around 15 or 15 or 16 years old
Okay,
is when I left foster care. I moved back home with my mother for the last few years,
Okay.
and then when I turned 18, I just left out on my own.
so it wasn't an aging out process?
It
in
wasn't
this
an
sense.
aging out
Okay,
process in
got
this
it.
sense, but it was,
Right,
I was even at that age, even being back home, I was ill-equipped for real life,
okay,
which I think is what a lot of these kids are facing, that, between the bouncing around and being a product of the system, there's, they're not getting the skills and the support system necessary for when they do turn 18 to be ready for the real world.
So when you moved back home with your mom,
Mm-hmm.
how did that go until you left?
It wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. There was a lot of resentment on my part because, I had spent the last 7, 8 years of my life living with other people because she couldn't be a parent and stick up for me. So there was a lot of resentment there, but it was, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I've always had this just internal drive to make myself not a statistic. And those support systems that I had kind of helped me along that way when I was in those families that were there for me. They always preached, positive words of encouragement for me. They explained to me that there really isn't something wrong with you. It's just the situation. You aren't the issue. It was, there was something going on with your parents or whatever. They always gave me that encouragement that, unfortunately I was just a circumstance. I wasn't the actual issue, even though, I was. I had my own issues going on, as you weren't here for the first part, but I did have ADD, severe attention deficit disorder. I had an attitude. I was just, defiant, but they looked beyond that, and they wanted to focus on the core, which was, me, and getting me to be better, not my situation, which is, what I'm trying to stress the most is, these kids just aren't foster kids. They're children who are facing tough issues right now, who need positive people behind them, and what you do as a foster parent really does have a big impact on them throughout their lives. And later on, I'm gonna read something from someone who was in foster care to someone 60 years later. So, anyone else?
In the large number of different foster homes you were in, there was at least one, obviously, where you felt positive,
Mm-hmm.
like your guard was down. Was there more than one?
There were two that there were always varying degrees, but there were two that I really had my guard down, where
Okay,
if the opportunity arose where I had to be adopted and they said, I would have been fine with that at that point in my life. One was I believe they were the Millers. And that was the father I was explaining that worked for IBM, and he considered, when you asked how many children he said he had 2 or however many foster kids, including his own son. But again, he lost his job at IBM and
okay,
couldn't provide the life that he in his mind had said, this is what I want to provide for these children.
right.
And then there was another family, I believe their name were the Heinrichs, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And they were just, it was a husband and wife, and they had one child, a son. And it was the same thing. It was just such a caring environment that, I called her mom, because, for the first time I had that stable living environment where, I felt safe. I felt that these people had my best intentions. And I don't know if it's still mandatory now, but I remember back then you had to meet with a therapist as a child. And I remember hearing the therapist say that, he's finally opening up. And that's just because of that safety that I felt, that, I said to myself, he said, okay, now it's time to work on me. And that's only possible because I finally felt safe, because I was in for so long. And, I remember hearing the therapist say, there's not much I could really tell you about them until I got to those places where I felt safe, and then I was able to open up.
In those two foster homes, right, as you began to feel comfortable, I guess, a lot of our kids in foster care will nevertheless test, act out, defy, even in caring foster homes. Did you do that?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
In
I
these
mean,
two
there was,
homes?
yep, there was always rules that, they had that you always broke, but as my wife always says, that's just a kid being a kid to some extent, and it's as a parent, I guess everyone has their own moral compass with this of how much you're willing to accept and how much you're willing to deal with, but defiance is also a test to see if you're gonna be there. So if curfew's this, or if there was something that I shouldn't have had, or there was one time I think I drank, and it's that reaction that's going to dictate what's going to happen. How my reaction's going to be. So if you come down or you're like, screw it, I can't deal with this kid anymore, get him out of here. Well, then my guards go up again. But if it's if it's used as a teaching mechanism, like, okay, this is not the way it should be done, but we still care about you, then you might not want to break the rules anymore because you feel like, okay, I finally have someone who really does care about me. Why would I want to push them away? Because there's every kid's going to test to see what they can get away with, and B, what's your level of interest. If I do this and you're just get them out of here, or you immediately go negative, well, then you're really not concerned. But if I do this and you sit me down and talk to me or talk to them about it and say, listen, this isn't right, this is right from wrong, and you explain it to them, again, it's a test.
And I don't think that's always, easy on the foster parent side to try to keep your cool and composure if they're destroying your house or having tantrums. And I think sometimes it can be really, difficult to do. But I think, my experience with foster parents has been pretty positive. And, I think kids do test. They do want to see, and I don't think they realize that. I don't think they realize that maybe the love that they're getting in your homes is really going to teach them about parenting in the future, because they may not be getting it from their homes, their own mothers. Like in Michael's instance, he certainly didn't learn to parent appropriately from his mother. The loving tenderness, for the most part, that he learned, I think he learned from these two homes that he really holds dear in his heart, but, regardless of whether the parents, come back for the kids or they go back home to the parents, whatever the case may be, there's that underlying resentment that the children still have. And sometimes that doesn't always go away. And sometimes that spills over, onto you guys. You're the fall guys, and it's a lot to take in. So you guys are the brave troops in the front line there for these children.
I'm just curious, I'm sorry, Ann. Were you in therapeutic or regular foster care?
I believe regular foster
Regular
care.
foster care. I asked because therapeutic is so much more difficult. Because sometimes our kids come in, they're already teenagers. So they've already had to go through so much before they were pulled out. And they don't want the love, they don't want the family, they don't want, anything that you want to give them. So it's a lot more difficult, because I've done both. As you, especially when we get the teenagers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes there's just nothing you could do. You can do everything you could think of, and it just does not work. I think therapeutic's a little bit more difficult, but you still try. You still try to do.
What you just said is really something to think about too. You know, what you guys go through coming into a new place, a new home, wondering who's gonna be nice with you, who's not gonna be. That must be something.
Oh, it's
hard on
it's
you guys.
beyond
Oh,
stressful.
It has to be, at such a little age too, like 9, 8, 7, 6,
Mhm.
you know.
And especially, I don't know what the rules are now, but I can remember in ninth grade alone, I was in 3 different schools because there were no jurisdictional or, let's keep them in this school district. It was, I went from Monticello to Ellenville to Onteora all in ninth grade alone.
That's the same thing now.
Yeah. And,
They'll relocate you.
it is difficult because you're coming into a new family. How are they going to react? Who am I living with? Who's going to be in a room with me? And I mean, there's a ton of fear and anxiety that you have just right off the bat. And you also have that, what the hell is wrong with me that I'm being bounced around again and again and again. And you do develop that hardness and that coldness to life and to people in general. And, I can only explain my situation and what you were talking about, but I would have to say even the hardest kid, deep, as much crap as they've dealt with deep down inside, they still want somebody to care for them. Someone, even if they will never admit it to you, deep down, they do appreciate it. And I mean, I know for a fact it can be frustrating because I saw what I did to people, but just never feel like what you're doing is in jest because they, I don't, the hardest kid out there deep down will appreciate the fact that, what, I was the biggest dick, I was the biggest pain in the ass I could ever be, but you know what, she was still there for me. And it will have a resounding effect on their lives.
You know why I asked that? Because the child that I have now, she's 7, but I got her when she was like 5, really little. And she just told me the other day, I remember the first day I met you. You came down the stairs and she told me what I had on. Because I don't know what I had on. And you was this and you said that and I knew this and I knew that. I said, wow, that that really shocked me because I didn't think she was that observant to anything. But I guess they come there with their antennas up, their ears open and everything
Oh, sure.
ready,
And I'm sure, as you guys know, there's loyalty issues too. They feel, those loyalty issues towards their parents, and if they like you,
Yes.
then they're just going against their parents and, X, Y, and Z, and I don't know you, I don't know how long I'm going to be in your home, and, all the stuff that Mike was saying, like I'm just a paycheck or whatever the case may be, and it's hard to let their guard down. But it's a long time to have, a child in your home. 2 years is a long time,
Yes.
and they build a bond,
It is a long time,
Real long.
time.
And they start to relearn, I can be loved, I can give love, I can be accepted. And one can only hope that if they ever have to go back home, that the situation there improves to where they don't have to repeat the craziness, because then it starts all over again.
And abandonment and rejection are very deep-seated feelings that last lifetimes. They really do. And by no means am I going to encourage anyone to stick with someone regardless of what's going on. But just realize that unfortunately, if you've reached your breaking point and you do have to, I don't want to say get rid of, but you can't have them disrupt anymore. It's just a perpetuation of rejection and abandonment that these kids will feel again, and it does. It's even in my own case. They're still, I'm 35 years old, but then there are still situations where I'm very, is this person gonna leave? Like, is this it? Is this over? And your guard goes up. So again, I'm not trying to force you to stick with whatever situation you may be in, but just always keep in the back of your mind that abandonment and rejection will stick with these people for the rest of their lives, to an extent.
And obviously the positive interaction that, he's had with those 2 foster homes. I mean, he's in the process of, trying to get all his records from when he was removed, and he's contemplating making contact with these families to say thank you. You know what? You really impacted my life. You were the shining hope in my life in a really dark moment, and I want to thank you for that. So you guys really do, you do impact lives, whether you know it in the moment or not.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on that, I can definitely attest to, at the time, even though I was appreciative, it was never said. But, as she said, we're in the middle of trying to find those records because they do need to be told, what a difference you had on my life and the impact that you did make. And, the walls that I was able to let down so I could work on some of the issues that I had.
You're referring to the two families in particular that
Correct.
you mentioned? You're trying to contact those folks?
Yes,
Say those things to them?
correct.
Uh-huh.
Because I think it helps. Just as, telling, what I'm trying to do with the foster kids by giving them, a positive role model and tell them, you aren't your situation, you aren't a product of your environment, you can turn your life around, you can do whatever you want with your life, to get them at that age. But it's also to help the parents with the same thing. You need that encouragement. You need to know that, what I'm doing is not in vain, that these kids are going to make something out of their lives, and you do have that positive impact on them, and you do play a major role in their lives. I'd say, I can't put percentages on it, but some of it has to do with my own desire to make myself better, but the other part of it has to do with these positive influences that I had, that I didn't become a statistic, that I didn't become just another, he was a kid in foster care. I'm not an excuse. And